Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anna Avliani, and I head up the Enterprise Hub at the Royal Academy of Engineering. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to our annual showcase event today, which this year, for obvious reasons, has gone virtual. At the Enterprise Hub, we work to increase the number and quality of high-growth engineering and technology companies that solve some of the society's most pressing challenges, fostering a culture of entrepreneurship, innovation, and success among engineers in the UK. We run 3 programs for entrepreneurial engineers at different career stages. Each one offers equity-free funding, an extended program of mentorship and coaching, and a lifetime of support through connection to an exceptional community of engineers and innovators. The Enterprise Hub focuses on supporting individuals and fostering their potential in the long term, taking nothing in return. This sets us apart from the usual accelerator model. The Enterprise Hub programs last between 6 and 12 months, and all programs give entrepreneurs lifelong access to a brilliant community of mentors and alumni. Our goal is to encourage creativity and innovation in engineering for the benefit of all. By fostering lasting, exceptional connections between talent and expertise, we aim to create a virtuous circle of innovation that can deliver on this ambition. The Enterprise Hub was formally launched in April 2013, and since then we have supported over 200 researchers, recent graduates, and scale-up business leaders to start up and scale up businesses that can give practical application to their inventions. We have awarded over 4 million in grant funding, and our hub members have gone on to raise over 100 million in follow-on funding. The Enterprise Hub is all about making exceptional connections, and it is with this in mind that we host this showcase event today, inviting investors, corporate partners, funders, and other key stakeholders so that they can hear the pitches from our entrepreneurs and hopefully forge new connections. We're extremely proud of the entrepreneurs presenting to you today. They have come a long way from when they first pitched to the selection panel for a place on our program to where they are today. In spite of their entrepreneurial journeys being coloured by the impact of the pandemic, these entrepreneurs have remained true to their commitment to bring about change, transform industries that they work in. And it is with great pleasure that we present to you Melissa, Rowan, Ben, Nade, George, Ali, Emanuela, Joshua, Ife, Lewis, Lorenzo, and Carl. I hope you enjoy meeting them and hearing their pitches. I'm now going to hand you over to our keynote speaker and your host for the afternoon, Professor Konstantin Kousios. The serial entrepreneur Konstantin co-founded Organox in 2008, developing the world's first normothermic liver perfusion device for improved organ preservation prior to transplantation. He founded Oxonics in 2014, exploiting nanobubbles and ultrasound to enhance drug delivery to tumors, and co-founded Orthoson in 2016, developing a new minimally invasive technique for repair and replacement of intervertebral discs. Konstantin received the Royal Academy of Engineering Silver Medal in 2017, and for his contribution, this was for his contribution for translating novel medical technologies into clinical practice. Finally, in 2019, he was elected a Fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering. So let me assure you, you're in brilliant hands this afternoon. Over to you, Konstantin.
Thank you very much, Anna. And thank you very much to Francesca and Amy for the opportunity to chair this exciting event today. I would like to share with you briefly my experiences in starting Organox, Oxonics, and Orthoson, which have already been brilliantly introduced by Anna. I set out to study something completely unrelated to where I've ended up. I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer when in 1994 I went to read for a general engineering degree in Cambridge. And over the course of a general engineering course, I ended up working on isolated perfused organs 4 years later for my MEng project. What you're seeing here is the world's first normothermic perfused liver, which is being controlled by a machine to go from a cold state on the very left to a fully warm and functional state on the very right. And the reason for that dramatic change was a life-changing cross-disciplinary encounter with a transplant surgeon called Peter Friend. I mention this because I think entrepreneurship stems out of opportunity, and we must always be open to new encounters and opportunities arising through these new encounters. And Peter and I have worked together now for the last 25 years, developing what is possibly the most complex medical device ever designed and built in the UK. Essentially, a machine described by Wired magazine as being so good, your liver will never know you're gone. It's effectively a fully automated body that creates an artificial environment around the organ to fool it into thinking it is still within the human body. That was my first hook, but I've also it also provided a springboard for me to live at least 3 lives over the course of 20 years. So Organox, I started essentially as an engineering undergraduate student. It only became a company about 10 years later in 2008 and was co-founded by someone much more senior than me. Oxonics, I was able to start as a University of Oxford professor, and it essentially centers on the idea of using ultrasound to push drugs bigger and better into tumors. And Orthoson, I was able to start as director of the Institute of Biomedical Engineering in Oxford, is a new technology for minimally invasive replacement of the intervertebral disc, all at very different stages, all having brought their own lessons to the entrepreneurial journey. So one of the key questions any entrepreneur asks himself is to launch or not to launch. And I think the first important definition here is whether one feels one has a great idea. Now, I have used the word great and I have intentionally not used the word novel because I think an idea can be unique, protectable, transformative, cost-effective, and marketable without necessarily being novel. I think the key question is whether it is an idea that has a huge amount of appeal and practical use. Much has been said over the years about the importance of intellectual property. And of course, intellectual property and filed IP is very important in getting investors and other parties engaged. But it is, in my experience, not the most important thing. Patents are a very small part of the story. Actually, ensuring that one has freedom to operate is important, but also making sure that one has the know-how and a way of translating this know-how into the new business. Much of the world's most successful engineering endeavors has been entirely secured through know-how and an absolutely unique way of executing something that isn't necessarily described in the underlying intellectual property. The other thing that is worth mentioning is a passion for translation. One of the things that took me completely by surprise is that translating academic research into engineering technology used a completely different part of my brain, but was in no way easier or more trivial. And I absolutely love this quote at the bottom of the slide. A common mistake that people make when trying to design something completely foolproof is to underestimate the ingenuity of complete fools. So it took me the better part of 10 years to go from a collection of cables and wires that could keep an organ already alive back in the late 90s to a machine that is NHS proof. And by NHS proof, I mean surgeon proof. And by surgeon proof, I mean has 3 buttons: play, stop, and eject. And achieving that level of technological robustness will test the limits of your technical knowledge as much as any academic exam or engineering qualification. Another really important aspect in starting an endeavor is being able to assemble a really good team. And mentorship outside the company is extremely important, but it's also very important to be introspective and figure out what it is you really can and can't do. In my experience, inventors rarely make good CEOs and vice versa. And it is very important to identify in the first employees of the company what the crucial skills for commercial success are. In my case, for Organox, it was a CEO, it was a regulatory affairs director who really knew what she was doing and had done it before, and subsequently an operations director to execute the more complex parts of the plan. And then translating research into technology really centers around unique selling points. It is very easy to become enamored with one's own technology, but what the market will care about, what the commercial aspects that will be important is what is being sold. More importantly, to whom is it being sold? What is the revenue model? And have a really clear idea what it is that the customer is gaining by using this product over any others. That is intimately linked to the product offering and whether, for example, it is purely a retained unit or a consumable model, which is also known as a razor blade model, and whether there are any reliances or internal or external partnerships in order to be able to derive commercial revenues. Another very important thing to define is not the market, but the addressable market. And what I mean by the addressable market is the one that your technology can specifically serve. So we realized in OrganOx that we can really start to compete on organs that are currently being transplanted. But what was really the commercial value in the company was the ability to generate additional transplants within current donation practice that were only possible using the OrganOx technology. And that is actually what has made the commercial success of the company. Once you decide what these unique selling points are, you then need to be able to put them in cartoon form. And I'm ashamed to admit it took me 10 years to realize that this technology here could be summarized in test drive the organ, not the patient, give yourself and the patient and the clinician more time, achieve more transplant, deliver better outcomes. And those USPs were demonstrated in a large-scale randomized trial that was published in Nature in May 2018. So it's very important to identify what those USPs are and then to go out and get irrefutable evidence to support them before entering the market. Also, when all entrepreneurs start their commercial journey, they very much hope that this is how the value of the company will grow. But in practice, it's also important to remember that this could happen. And in my experience, neither of those is true. A company's value actually goes in a staircase format, like step functions. And it is never the particular milestone that an entrepreneur thinks is going to add value that adds value. So in medtech, there are only two events that matter: the technology being used reliably in human, and also someone being willing to pay commercial revenues in order to use the technology. And of course, before any of it starts, one already has to think about what the potential exit might be. And some of the common routes are IPO, trade sale or acquisition and combinations thereof. My current OrganOx chairman says great companies are not sold, they are bought. And so even though it's important to have this at the back of one's mind, we cannot decide what we do with a company by trying to engineer a particular exit. Once all of these things are clear, the next element is fundraising. And what we need to do is make sure that the company raises enough capital to be able to cross the next important milestone in capital fundraising. And so how you distribute the capital in order to achieve uplifts in valuation and be able to raise the next tranche of capital fully warrants some thinking early on. Because it is actually through this combined approach that the key thing at the back of one's mind needs to be value creation through technology deployment. And actually understanding what the key hurdles one has to jump through in order to achieve the relevant valuations is extremely important. So in summary, the capital investment is an absolutely crucial point for all entrepreneurs. And the one piece of advice I want to leave you with that I was given is start by talking to your least relevant investors first. And then work your way up the list to your most relevant investors. Because that way, by the time you have actually completed your list of due diligence, you will have perfect answers to the really tough questions to those investors who really matter. So I hope this provides a framework of the type of questions our very exciting entrepreneurs can hope for. I'd like to leave you with my 3 favorite quotes as to what engineering entrepreneurship is. And I think most above all, it's a willingness to make things happen, to deploy inventions into the real world and see them used. With that, I will stop and make a transition to the very exciting group of entrepreneurs we have with us today. We have 12 Enterprise Fellowship awardees who will be presenting, and I find it extraordinarily apt that we are doing this in the same week as the leader of some of the world's most exciting engineering companies. Elon Musk has leapfrogged both Bill Gates and Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg in creating some of the world's most valuable companies. So each of the 12 awardees will have 3 minutes to pitch, and we will then have a short Q&A for 3 minutes, which I will do my best to chair. The presentations have been split into 2 groups of 6, and halfway through there will be a 10-minute comfort break, after which we will reconvene for the second half of the presentation. In terms of how you engage with the Q&A, I'd like to request that you please submit your questions by clicking on Q&A in the toolbar at the bottom of the screen, and then typing your question in the open field. We do encourage you to submit your questions during the presentation, and I will then pose a select number to our entrepreneurs depending on timings. We will, of course, work very hard to stick to time throughout. And for those who may not be able to fully ask their questions, it will also be possible to connect with our awardees after today's event. So please add your details to the contact form, and the link for this form is now being shared with you via the chat by the Royal Academy team. The Academy team has taken upon itself to kindly facilitate these introductions after the event. So we can now start with the first good group of entrepreneurs presenting this morning. We look forward to your questions to the pitchers, and as I mentioned, we encourage you to submit these during the presentation so we can start our discussions right away. And now we will begin with our first entrepreneur, Dr. Melissa Berthelot of Warnerpatch.
Hi, thank you so much for the introduction. So my name is Melissa, and I'm from Warnerpatch. Quick question here. Do you know how people come to have amputations? Amputations actually happen because blood vessels rot away, preventing nutrients and blood from coming through to the limb, which leads to ulcers, wound, and eventually amputation. There are many sources from that, but this condition can only stabilize or get worse. And that's not isolated. Today in the UK, there are 40,000 people that are at risk of losing a limb within 6 weeks if it's not properly managed. And in particular, after 2 years of amputation, there's only 50% of these people that actually survive, and those who do have a radically reduced quality of life. So what can we do? How can we prevent these conditions from actually getting worse? The next slide, please. Imagine if we had a crystal ball that could foresee the problem ahead while also keeping patients out of the hospital. That solution is Warnerpatch. It's a non-invasive wearable sensor that continuously assesses tissue composition on a 3D map, allowing to give that understanding of tissue health over time. And it works like a phone. You plug it and it transfers data from the patient straight to the doctor. We've successfully get £400,000 of grant funding and strategic partnership. And we've also managed to do preclinical data to show the efficacy of our sensor. And not only that solution will help healthcare providers better manage their resource, it's providing actionable data that would lead to earlier surgical intervention and reducing morbidity and mortality. If fully deployed throughout the NHS and throughout the UK, Warnerpatch could save £500 million every year. Next slide, please. Our business model is flexible as it integrates a reusable, consumable, and software subscription parts, and it can be tailored to our customers. Our customers are public and private healthcare providers that can be accessed through medical device distributors, but also we are thinking of pharmaceutical companies. Next slide, please. This market is big and growing with an annual £11 billion market. And now with our 3 NHS Trust partners, we forecast an £8 billion revenue by 2025. Next slide, please. Today, we're raising £500,000 to complement that £400,000 to bring our product to market. I want to thank the amazing team, I think it was last slide, who've relentlessly been working with us, not only on the technical side of things to make this a reality, but also our clinical champions that have not only opened doors to the hospitals and patients, but also to CCGs. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Melissa. You mentioned that your product is a Class 2A medical device under the medical device regulation. How do you anticipate being able to achieve a CE mark with 500K of funding?
Right, so this step is of funding is very much to bring our product to market. So in total, we would have raised £900,000, which will really very much complement, in particular, the Innovate UK grant that we've recently been awarded. And the goal is to reach to the point where we can have CE mark our product, and then with our design manufacturer that we've just partnered with to set up the manufacturing line and get started on production. But the first goal is to reiterate those partnership with hospitals to make sure that we can set up contracts in place and also get our CE mark for the product. So there would be another fundraising after that.
Thank you. And how do you plan to access markets outside the UK?
So we are part of the Barclays Ego Lab network, which really very much helped us in acquiring those NHS partners that I mentioned. So in particular, UCL hospitals, the Manchester and Leeds hospitals, which are one of the biggest when it comes to podiatry and vascular surgical training hubs. And so their CCG are very much focused towards better remote monitoring and towards improving patient outcome while also being outside of the hospital, and also with a very much focused on digital health. And so that's how we're aiming to acquire our very first customers, and then building up from that, looking towards more distribution channels.
And then I'm sorry if you mentioned it and I missed it. What is your device actually measuring?
Right. So the major parameter that we're looking into is tissue oxygen saturation, which is an indirect parameter that tells us about tissue health and how that complements, I'm so sorry for the noise, that complements the way that tissue is being monitored over time.
Thank you very much, Melissa.
Thank you so much.
I would now like to take this opportunity to introduce our next speaker, who is Rowan Minkley from Chipsboard. Rowan, over to you.
Good afternoon. I'm Rowan, CEO and co-founder of Chipsboard, a bioplastic technology company. Next slide, please. And next again. Plastic pollution is at a catastrophic high, with only 15% of plastic waste making it to recycling facilities. Blue Planet did an amazing job to spotlight the challenges surrounding single-use plastics. However, this is the wrong end of the iceberg, as durable plastic goods make up 61% of the market. Next. From buttons to bookcases and spectacles to school chairs, there's a huge range of durable items that need to be brought into a circular economy through using sustainable alternatives to petroleum plastics. And plastics aren't the only problem. Resources are being wasted across the board, with a third of all food produced becoming waste. Next. Our core objective is to find value in what others see waste, creating a true circular economy bioplastic using abundant waste as a feed source. Supplied by McCain, we've developed a process which transforms their waste into Parplex, plastic from potato waste. Next. And Parplex isn't just any plastic. at the end of a product's life, Parplex can be sustainably disposed of via composting or recycling, which prevents the pollution of our planet. And the process doesn't stop with potatoes. Next. A key aspect to our technology is ensuring the process is adaptable, enabling expansion across multiple regions, nations, and seasons. Next. Compared to petrochemical plastics, Parplex is non-toxic, biodegradable, has a low impact from manufacturing, and doesn't involve mining for oil in nature reserves. Next. Our main competitors in the bioplastic industry use virgin food crops, such as corn or sugar beet. By focusing on abundant waste, our materials remove the need to consume additional resources, growing and harvesting food crops to make bioplastics. Next. In fact, switching to Parplex over purpose-grown bioplastics has the potential to save 6 to 8% of global arable land. Next. Currently, bioplastics represent less than 1% of the petrochemical plastic industry. Manufacturers will require numerous options for materials, which leaves space for multiple symbiotic solutions to emerge. Next. In the EU bioplastic market is valued at £3.1 billion and produces 400,000 tonnes of material a year. We aim to produce at least 150,000 tonnes of Parplex using available UK food waste. Next. We've already been approached by a huge range of companies in the fashion, interior design and manufacturing sectors as they search for solutions to their circular economy needs. Next. Our core team consists of myself and co-founder Rob Nicol, supported by our highly skilled technical staff. Next. Our route to market is now in phase 2. This involves refining and scaling up our technology, ready for establishing a pilot facility in Yorkshire in early 2021. Next. So today, I'm here to ask for your support. We have an investment round open for £1 million. This round will allow us to establish the pilot and begin the commercialization of Parplex. Next. Now, climate change is not a local, but global issue. And we believe with your support and our innovation, we can really make a difference in saving our planet. Next. Thank you for your time. I look forward to any further questions you have for me.
Thank you, Rowan. A very quick question for me. It seems that quite a lot of what you're describing is around the process of turning potato waste into electronics. Is that something on which you have intellectual property protection, and how broad do you feel it is?
So at the moment, everything's covered under trade secrets, IP assignments, and non-disclosures. We're looking at filing an end-to-end patent in early 2021. The reason for holding it at the moment is we want to get a last bit of technical data in there that will support the full end-to-end mothership patent. We currently have trademarks on both our name and the product name.
I'm assuming you're aware you can continue to add technical data for another 12 months after filing. So I would encourage you to, it's a very active space. I would encourage you to go at it as quickly as possible. We have a question here from the audience. How will you handle the logistics of collecting food waste?
Sure. So our main partner at the moment is a company called Doini. They're a European food byproduct logistics company. So they work with companies like McCain and basically move their food waste around at the moment. So they'll run all of the logistics in terms of collecting and distributing the food waste for us. The reason for using them is they can cover all of the operational logistics, and that's their core business model, which means we don't have to kind of hire and operate a series of trucks and manage all the different resources.
And onto more engineering aspects, how do the physical properties, for example, the mechanical and electrical properties of your board product compare with either currently used plastics or the competition, and what kind of products are made from it?
Sure. So for the bioplastic Parplex that we're making, we're looking at using it for fashion and interior design as kind of the first markets we're looking at. So currently we have trials set up making eyewear frames, buttons. We're looking at textiles and a few other different uses. We also have a project with Loughborough University looking at developing bio-based plasticizers. The benefit of those being we can manipulate the formulation of the polymer, and the kind of baselines that we're looking at matching are a material similar to ABS, HDPE and LDPE.
And a very quick final question. Do you already have users or customers for the bioplastic you are producing? You mentioned you've spoken to a lot of people. Do you already have some of those users?
Yeah, so we've got a much more technical sales pipeline that we'd be happy to share with any interested investors. We currently have, I believe, 5 R&D trials signed off that are ready to go as soon as we establish the pilot facility. And we have a further 20 to 30 companies, ranging from kind of small individual designers to global conglomerates who are very interested and are in the process of signing R&D trials, so we can kind of take them into the next step of commercialization.
So just to confirm, because this has come through as a direct question, so you have some paid pilots at the moment?
We have some signed off ready to go. At the moment, we're only producing at lab scales. We're talking kind of a couple of kilos per batch. So the benefit of this pilot facility is we're looking to produce about 100 kilos of polymer per month is the kind of minimum, and that will allow us to work with more than one commercial R&D trial. So we've got 5 lined up at the moment. So kind of hoping to move into the next stages with them.
Rowan, on behalf of the whole audience, thank you very much for a fantastic presentation. I would now like to introduce Dr. Ben Dolman, who will be presenting Holoferm to us.
Hello, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, so I'm Ben Dolman. I'm the CEO of Holoferm. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so we're focused on the surfactant industry. So surfactants are chemicals that enable foaming and cleaning in all household and personal care products. There's a huge market pull at the moment with companies like Unilever announcing they're going to switch to 100% bio-based products. Next slide, please. There's already fermentation-derived surfactants available on the market produced by batch fermentation. What we have done is developed an integrated separation technology which enables us to produce biosurfactants by fermentation and go from a batch to a continuous process and therefore intensify the process. We filed a patent for this technology and applied it to several different products. Next slide, please. Biosurfactants are currently on the market for around 10 euros a kilo. We can bring the production cost of the biosurfactants down to just over 2 euros a kilo at a 1 kiloton per annum scale. And when we go to full mass market, we can produce for less than €1 a kilo. And that's around, at both scales, around half of the price of competitive technologies, and well within the prices that biosurfactants can be sold. Next slide, please. Our first target product are sofrolipids, which are a fermentation-derived surfactant that can be formulated for high and low foam applications, so across the whole of home and personal care. And they're particularly effective in home and personal care, oil field, and agricultural applications. Next slide, please. We're launching with 2 different products, which are currently under pilot testing by 10 or more paying customers. Next slide, please. Our plan for commercialization. So we have a pilot plant that will be installed by mid Q1 2021, which will enable us to produce up to around 25 tons of product per year for small scale commercial sale and large scale testing. We're then fundraising for our commercial 1 plan, which will enable us to go to an 1,100 ton per annum product volume, and that will be a profitable venture and requires 5 million euros of funding. We then look in the future to go to mass market scales of 20,000 tons plus per annum to be able to capture a significant share of the market. And we already have LOIs for 800 tons of the product from our commercial 1 plant. Thanks very much for listening, and I'd love to take any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Ben, for a really interesting presentation. Could you elaborate a little bit on what the unique features or aspect of your bio-based surfactants are? Because there have been bio-based surfactants known in the literature for a while. So what is it that makes yours unique, and what is that would make it difficult for someone to come and compete with you?
So there are a number of bio-based surfactants available. Specifically, the ones we're looking at are the fermentation-derived biosurfactants. The specific one we're looking at first is the sofrolipids, and that technically outperforms the other biosurfactants available. So there's been significant testing which shows that, for instance, it has superior hard surface cleaning and foaming properties to a lot of the other biosurfactants. What we do differently to other providers is we can produce it for less than half the price. So this has been on the market in niche applications for over 10 years, but the price is limiting the volumes. We can bring that price down, so it's cost in use actually cheaper to use that than the petrochemical alternatives or other bio-based alternatives.
And how confident are you that as this really picks up, the Unilevers or the 3Ms of this world will not turn around and invest in ways that will make production costs much cheaper without necessarily the need to engage you? What's the competitive threat or level of competitive threat moving forward?
So if you look at the kind of companies who would consider competing would be the big surfactant manufacturers, so the likes of BASF and Evonik and Dow. We've had a number of these companies actually approach us, and we're negotiating with a number of these companies for potential partnerships, because they're looking, and there are a number of companies looking to get into this market. But actually, we have the IP both in trade secrets and in a pending patent. That means it's very difficult for any of them to replicate this. So we believe that they're more like to work with us than compete.
And what routes to market do you think will enable you to achieve scale? So where will you really be able to scale this up from the point of view of the customer or the application?
Do you mean which applications, or what's the collaboration path? What?
Either, because they're quite often related. So where do you see this going big first?
So I think home and personal care is the big industrial driver. I would say that so our commercial one plant is still relatively small in terms of commercial manufacturing of these kind of products. So I would say we're looking to take that kiloton step as a commercial demonstrator before working with one or more of the big surfactant players who can really invest the tens of millions that we can move to 20,000, 50,000 kiloton plants and really scale up. And that will be in the home and personal care industry. And there's there's companies like Unilever, so they're using hundreds of thousands of tons of surfactants as a single company. They have to transfer their entire surfactant base from petrochemical to biosurfactants within the next 10 years, according to their goal.
Dr. Ben-Dolmer, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I would now like to take this opportunity to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Na Day Nikoi, who will be sharing with us the Idaruma technology speech.
Okay. Next slide, please. Look, it's a common action that we take, but 6 of us will are at risk of losing our vision as we age. Age-related macular degeneration is the leading cause of blindness in the developed world. Fortunately, there's excellent treatment for its most aggressive forms. Next slide, please. It comes in the form of antibody injections into the eye. These need to be performed up to once every month for up to 5 years. And a third of people drop out before they complete the full course because of the hassle of attending treatments, the discomfort of it, and the risk of complications. For the last 15 years, pharmaceutical companies have been looking to improve these therapies. Next slide, please. Idaruma Technologies we've come up with a technology that enables these same therapeutics to be delivered as eye drops instead of injections, meaning that instead of an up to 18-week wait to start your first appointment, you pick up a prescription the very same day. Who wants it? Please, next slide, please. Well, already across the world, there are about 300 million people who need this kind of therapy, either through AMD or through diabetic retinopathy. And it's a market that was worth $14 billion last year and has been growing by about 6% a year. By the middle of the century, we're looking at 500 billion people. Next slide, please. The technology in use, the use of antibody injections, has largely replaced laser photocoagulation as the therapy of choice. And rather than compete with them, what we do is that we enable these technologies to reach more customers and do the job more effectively. And our technology is not only patented, but it is 100 times more efficacious than the leading topical delivery systems under development. Next slide, please. My ask is for £350,000 to start as pre-seed funding for what will be a very lean company. What we are doing is that we work with pharmaceutical companies to co-develop their formulation and license the technology to them. We receive license milestones as it goes through the various phase trials and negotiate for a share of the royalties. We currently are working with a company that is one of the largest generics biomanufacturers within the EU. Next slide, please. We have a nascent team consisting of myself and two serial entrepreneurs, Felicity De Kogan and Anna Peacock. Our clinical lead is a consultant who specializes in adult retinal diseases, and we're currently speaking to a commercial development lead who we hope we can start in 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Na, for a really interesting presentation. I'd be remiss as an Oxford person to not ask you this. Can you compare your technology to the virotherapy treatments that have been developed by Robert McLaren here and Night Star on targeting the genetic mechanism of age-related macular degeneration?
Oh, certainly. Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. Sorry about that. Certainly one of the big pushes is that rather than treating with anti-VEGF, which just stops the protein that is responsible that drives the inflammatory process that leads to blindness, it's to treat with a genetic. It's to treat genetic. To treat with a gene, which means that you do have to have quite an invasive injection, but hopefully you only need it once. We have been speaking to a couple of companies who are in this space and are very interested in the potential of our technology to be adapted to improve the transfection efficacy, or even to serve as a carrier for the genetics, because our technology does not produce highly immunogenic viral particles. So I'm hoping that rather than competing with them, it might be something where we can actually start, what do they call it? Strategic partnerships?
Okay, and we have another question here.
Yes, please.
Which is, do you have a licensing business model so you won't manufacture the device yourself nor the eye drops yourself?
This has been a really good question for us. It is leaner to license, but I feel that longer term, we would be better off developing the eye drops ourselves, or at least developing part of the components of the eye drops. But this is one of those things that we hope to grow to a point where we can actually have manufacturing capacity.
Are there any long-term risks to the patient from the underlying nanoparticle technology?
This is one of the good parts about our tech, is that it does not, as currently formulated, consists of it forms temporary nanoparticles. And so what it does is that we have it. I fluster a little. Less flustered. What it does is that the molecules associate non-covalently with our target molecules, which is something we can tune, and because the target molecules recognize that sites much more strongly, it breaks. We've demonstrated that able to break out. And what happens then is that it can be cleared by the body. This is really important for organs such as the eye, because if you put actual physical nanoparticles in the eye, there's no clearance system And so they're very slow to clear, if at all. So if you can imagine, if you're doing that long term, you just fill someone's eye up, which is not a good look. I'm sorry, I did not intend to pun.
Thank you very much. Now, that was a really enlightening and really interesting presentation. Thank you very much indeed. I would now like to take the opportunity to introduce George Winfield, who will introduce either Spirus or Spirus to us, and I'll leave him to correct me if I've got this wrong.
No problem. Spirus is how we pronounce it. But anyway, thank you very much. Respiratory illness affects 1 in 5 people and is one of the largest killers in the UK. But when was the last time you checked your breathing? How do you know your breathing is even good or bad? It was never something I really considered before, especially since breathing change is one of the first, most vital indicators in overall health. But yet, most respiratory devices are catered for a reactive measurement when a problem has already been identified. Think inhalers for asthma or cystic fibrosis, spirometry for COPD, and other disease management. The question is, how can we be proactive in assessing respiratory health and make it accessible for everybody, whether it needs to be in sports, well-being, or medical? Respiratory illness and awareness has not only been exaggerated by the sole reason we are doing this, but it does give a person the opportunity to provide a well-being wearable to assess respiratory function remotely. Next slide, please. Spirus has placed its patented paper sensors into the masks of users to track activity levels and respiratory patterns that can be indicators of ill health. Paper absorbs water from the breath that increases conductivity levels, and it gives a highly accurate, disposable, and real-time method for respiratory monitoring that is displayed on the user's phones. We integrate the sensors into the filters of these masks, and the accompanying software is sold as a license. The filters are on a subscription basis that we sell, as Constance previously mentioned, as a razor blade model. We currently have beta users signed up for December, and our IP on this particular product is in 2 patent pending filings. Next slide, please. Active wearer masks have provided no better time for potential growth for protective respiratory monitoring, with a secure future in the pollution mask industry, where interest has actually been attained by Uniqlo in Japan to offer a premium product to their customers. Spirus's advantage against others is the ability to go deeper into the analysis and tailor readings in combination to pollution, weather, and pollen to understand the user's own breathing, because it's such a unique vital sign. The sensors have been tested to also detect gases on breath for internal body function, but we've kept this within its research phases for later. Under Armour have also shown a particular interest in this product to offer a premium edition for athletic monitoring, to be able to offer athletes combining their respiratory function in tandem with their heart rate data. This has also gone into Peloton for API and software interest for their cyclists. Next slide, please. Spirus is seeking £350,000 to complete the necessary testing procedures and to allow for the product to enter the EU market for early 2021, to bridge the gap between the already invested £400,000 of grants and award funding that we have attained to date. In terms of revenue, we hope to license the hardware offering at some point in the future and invest back into the underlying software and platform that we've actually started to create. Because with the system in place, we've actually had paid revenue from 2 customers wanting to attach their product offerings onto our analytics and software. Training Mask over in the US have paid for $25,000 for 4 devices in a respiratory trial, and we're in the final stages of negotiating a deal with PowerBreathe to bring on their products onto our platform. With that being said, Spirus wants to be the premium software analytics provider in the respiratory space, and we want to be able to do that starting with our first product, which is using just a simple piece of paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. And that was extremely interesting. Can you tell me, is your product classified as a medical device, or do you expect it to be? And more importantly, what do you think people will do with the data that you produce? How will it be used to inform either the training regimen or subsequent treatment?
Yeah, the first element of that is that we want to position this as the Fitbit for masks, allow users to have informative decisions. This is by no means positioned to make any medical claims or disease management in any way, shape or form, which is why we want to accelerate this route to market in our first product. And in the second question, it gets rather interesting when you start correlating breathing pattern changes in relation to the air that you start to breathe with open APIs or pollution. So being able to correlate changes in your breathing pattern as you're walking down outside Brixton, for instance, is very different if I was walking up in the hills in Yorkshire. It starts to allow users to attain and make changes to their overall commute, exercise, and allow them to overall have a better input into what their respiratory health is currently being.
Who are your target customers? What are your target customer segments?
The first one is in the particular athletes. Going back through my background at Loughborough, we've started now to reach out to unique athletes, being able to take out those, what previously was a lab soul-derived testing procedure, and being allowed to offer those athletes to tie in their respiratory function with APIs in the, for instance, and tying that with Fitbit or any of the Apple Watch cardiac data, and tailoring their performance and exercises to those particular performance increases as such.
And finally, beside funding, what would you look for from a strategic partner or corporate to help you scale up?
There's particularly in the data interest. We inadvertently invested in creating a cloud connected IoT device is essentially what we have here, and other businesses leveraging their product positions in markets that we wouldn't enter at this stage in our life story has created a very unique data set that gets rather interesting when you start looking at medical devices for COPD management, our own in the pollution and athletic space, and again over in a different continent, leveraging the data in the US for resistive straining masks. It gets very interesting when we leverage those data sets, and we hope to be able to really, how can we derive value from that and offer premium analytics on top of that we would like to revert back as a software as a service.
George Winfield, thank you very much for a very exciting presentation.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to take this opportunity now to introduce Dr. Alireza Abbasi Monjezi, who will introduce Waterwhelm to us.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I have a very long name, but you can call me Ali to save time. I'm the founder of Waterwhelm. Next slide, please. The market we're addressing is the global water market. There are over 2 billion people worldwide with lack of access to safe drinking water. The global water market is predicted to grow by $200 billion in the next decade. Next slide, please. Our solution is a technology, a patent pending technology that uses heat instead of electricity, and is to replace the most common technology of reverse osmosis that is used in the water industry. Next slide, please. Compared to reverse osmosis, we'll offer a saving of 35%, as you can see in this case study. That's because we operate at much lower pressures. The reverse osmosis market was valued at $18.5 billion in 2019 and is set to reach $27 billion by 2025. Next slide, please. We currently have a collaboration with Veolia. They were our first pilot plant processing over 10,000 litres per day will be based. Next slide, please. This is our team with a combined experience of 50 years. We're a team of 4 currently developing this pilot plant, which will arrive in February next year. Next slide. This is what it looks like. On the left, you see a pilot plant that was placed in the chemical engineering labs at the University of Surrey, where I was a PhD student and worked there. Then it translated into an industrial pilot in Oman. The spin-out was then bought out by a company called Modern Water, who did an IPO and raised £30 million on AIM. Next slide, please. This is their technology. Our technology is different to this, and it will offer an extra 50% of savings in CapEx and 40% in electricity consumption. Next slide, please. This is another company, Desalitech, which was acquired in January this year for $60 million by DuPont. They have a similar type of technology that is to improve reverse osmosis. Next slide, please. And this is our timeline. We were selected and awarded as the top startup in Scotland in 2019. We were also awarded as the top enterprise coming out of the University of Edinburgh. one of the top 20 universities in the world. And we are looking to get our pilot plant in February. Next slide, please. This is our timeline. We have raised 400K so far in grant funding and private investment. We are looking to raise an extra £1 million in the first half of 2021, which would be about £500,000 in investment and £500,000 from Innovate UK. This will allow us to then reach the next technology milestone, building a larger industrial plant, at which point we will be raising between £1 to £2 million to reach a fully commercialized, industrialized plant doing over 1,000 cubic meters of wastewater treatment or desalination per day. Next slide. Thank you very much, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ali, for a technology with huge potential humanitarian impact. If I could ask you, do you have any technical data you could share with us about the quality of the water that is produced using your process compared to reverse osmosis?
Absolutely. So on bench scale, this has shown to reach essentially the same levels of water purity as reverse osmosis, essentially because the membrane technology is the same.
Thank you. And is this technology useful at sort of village or town level in the third world, or is it more about large centralized plants?
Absolutely. One of the biggest advantages of this technology is that it's modular. So if you can get it to work for essentially one household, you can scale up from then and size it up to providing water for a whole city.
And going back to my presentation earlier and a question from the audience here, who will be your main customer? Who do you intend to sell this to?
Mainly water companies such as Veolia. So for example, we're in discussions with them for a 300,000 litre per day plant at the site we are based at, to be able to use industrial waste heat from the current operations to clean up essentially their wastewater and recycle the water for the industrial operations on site. So it would be water companies such as Veolia, DuPont, Suez, and also in some developing countries, this would be local authorities and governments to provide water either from wastewater or seawater for desalination purposes.
And could you elaborate a little bit on your IP position?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've applied for a European patent on which we got a good response initially. We will be going into a PCT in February next year.
And last but not least, how does your sort of efficiency, both in terms of energy and in terms of filtration efficiency, compare to current RO systems?
Sure. Just to clarify on the IP is also owned fully by Waterwell. So the company owns 100% of the IP. In terms of energy consumption, reverse osmosis for seawater desalination applications uses 3 kilowatt hours per every cubic meter of water desalinated. So that's 3. We would be able to achieve half a kilowatt hour per every cubic meter of water desalinated. So that is a saving of 85% in terms of energy consumption by using either industrial waste heat that is already available and being wasted and having a negative environmental impact, or by raising essentially the heat through either geothermal energy or solar thermal energy. So there is a great potential there for combining this with renewable energy sources.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Ali. I would like to thank you for a really inspiring presentation, and also to thank all entrepreneurs who've pitched in the first half. We will now take a 7-minute comfort break. We will restart promptly at 3:06. And I would therefore like to ask that whilst away, you turn your camera off and mute yourself. and we will rejoin at 3:05, a minute before, in order to get ready for 3:06 start. Thank you all very much. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I would like to move to the second half of our presentation for today, and welcome the second lot of fantastic speakers we have for this afternoon. So please remember to enter your questions during the presentation in order to enable us to field them just as the speaker ends. And I'm delighted to now introduce Dr. Emanuela Maggioni from OWidgets, who will be accompanied for Q&A by Professor Florin Udrea after her presentation. Emanuela, over to you and welcome.
Hello, everyone. I'm Emanuela, co-founder and CEO of OWidgets, a solution for smell-based application. Next slide, please. Dysfunction or sense of smell have a tremendous negative effect on our quality of life in many dimensions. It has been recently shown with COVID patients. This is nevertheless an invalidating condition for 75% of aging population. Next slide, please. We can do something. We can introduce an healthcare routine of our sense of smell with physiotherapy through a regular training exercise. This will improve the overall quality of life and helping to predict, slow down, and play a counter effect of degenerative disease development and sensory decay. And also it can speed up the recovery process in COVID patients. Next slide, please. However, current available solutions are analogic and unreliable as using pens. We offer the first digitalized and fully automated adaptive system composed of a software infrastructure and hardware solution to personalize scent presentation, store records and profiles with a user-friendly interface. All the technology has been patent protected. Smell training is only one example of many possible healthcare applications and beyond that. Next slide, please. OWidget team is a great interdisciplinary group from UCL and Cambridge universities, combining several years of experiences in academia and business, from digital healthcare, smell perception, human-computer interaction, to engineering expertise in sensor and microelectronics. Next slide, please. Besides the first target market of healthcare, there are several other possible verticals in which we can position our technology, from entertainment to automotive. Next, please. We are already having early revenues and traction from different sectors, as you can see here summarizing this slide. Next slide, please. This is a picture of our current technology, our second generation device that we developed with our first client in the healthcare, Rockefeller University, for the first digitalized and standardized smell test. Next, please. OWidgets has a unique position in the market between lab-based expensive olfactometer and gadget and unreliable consumer devices. Next, please. OWidget business model is initially based on recurring engineer services, rapid prototype, sales of delivery device and cartridges, and with a long-term ambition to become a company provider of certified standards in the field of smell applications. Next, please. We have a clear steps forward to launch our first product for smell training on the market by June 2021. And we are seeking to close by February 2021 our CIS seed funding round just started, where we closed the first 60K investment. Thanks. Next, please. Thanks for the attention, and I'm here for any question.
Thank you very much, Emanuela. I'd also like now to welcome Florin for any Q&A that may be the two of you. Hello, welcome. I think my first question to both of you is what are you actually selling and to whom?
Yes. So we are selling a hardware device that is delivering smells. That is a new generation of device with sensor that can control the delivery, the airflow, and also adapting to the user input. So can vary the delivery through the perceptual feedback of the user, and they can also differ from different applications. So for healthcare, we need to have a very accurate, reliable delivery, also to mix chemicals in the future. And then we also offer the software infrastructure where there can be different applications. The smell training can be one of that. And with the cloud solution, we can have a digitalized record and we keep track of all the data, and they can we integrate with the testing as well to monitor the performance of smell capability over time.
The audience here is there a potential market for training for ordinary individuals, if there is such a thing, in wine appreciation or tasting, as this is very heavily based on smell?
Absolutely, yes, this can be a potential application as well, all based on training, and can vary the performance of the training in function of the the answer and the, let's say, development of the skills in the tasting.
How would you confirm for the end user that the training is working? What objective standards of correctness of smell can you refer to?
So it will be trained and tailored to your performance. So there will be a time zero in which you will start recording, and then you can see the improvement, because the device will then modify and make the training harder over time if it's necessary in function of your development of the performance.
Thank you very much, Emanuela. Thank you very much, Florin. I would like to thank you both for a really unusual presentation. I knew nothing about smell until I heard it.
Thank you.
And I would welcome any further questions from the audience offline to both Emanuela and Florin. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our next speaker for this afternoon, Dr. Joshua Steer, who will be introducing radar devices to us.
Thanks, everyone. Hi, my name is Joshua Steer. I'm the founder and CEO of Radio Devices, and we use intelligent software to support and empower the fitting of external medical devices. Next slide, please. There are well over 100 million people worldwide who require prosthetics, orthotics, or wheelchairs to be independent and mobile in their daily lives. And during COVID-19, the NHS has spent billions on PPE and respiratory masks to ensure that patients and staff are safe. Yet for all these medical devices, the problem is the same. The fit is often inadequate, unsafe, and causes the user pain due to a failure to properly fit the device to the unique geometry of each individual. This means that multiple attempts are required to fit the device, leading to increased costs for the healthcare provider and reduced quality of life for the user. Next slide, please. Radio devices are applying intelligent software to get perfect fit faster. We take the cutting edge of engineering and make it accessible for clinical application, adapting design tools so they're simple and precise for clinicians, and using already collected 3D scan data to analyze the relationship between anatomy and fit across the population. Finally, we're developing biomechanical models for medical imaging to provide a real-time prediction of the pressure at the device interface. These tools combine together empower clinicians to create better designs and outcomes for their patients and reduced refitting costs for healthcare providers. Next slide, please. We have identified prosthetics and orthotics as our key beachhead market. These devices are custom made by skilled clinicians, yet there exists no analysis of fitting, leading to up to 9 clinical visits. Our competition comes from existing practice of plastercast and companies using simple CAD systems. The Radio Devices design platform provides a step change to this industry, aiming to reduce the number of costly visits. And we are in advanced discussions and trials with UK clinics and aim to have our first contract by early next year. This is the start of accessing a £200 million serviceable addressable market with our software as a service model, which slots directly into existing clinical infrastructure. Next slide, please. Beyond this, we have identified a host of other markets where we have the potential to deliver a platform solution. And in June, we signed an 18-month consultancy project in collaboration with the University of Southampton to develop tools to improve the fit of a medical device for one of the largest companies in the world. Next slide, please. We're currently a full-time team of 3 with a decade of experience in the industry and are just coming towards the end of hiring a further 3 members of staff. In addition, we're supported by 2 academics at the university who are working to identify new applications. Next slide, please. Having secured a small pre-seed round as lockdown was first imposed in March, we have developed and tested our first product ready for clinical implementation. And during next year, we'll be opening our next funding round. This will enable us to grow our team, develop and scale our solution, and identify new applications to reduce time and cost for healthcare providers and increase comfort and quality of life for patients. Thank you very much, and I'd be delighted to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Joshua. Can you help me understand a little bit how this fits in with the increasing efforts of biomedical 3D printing? And do you see that as a complementary product or a competing product? And where do you fit in that pipeline?
Yeah, so we see 3D printing as completely complementary to what we're doing. 3D printing opens up this whole potential of creating patient-specific devices in the clinic, but the design has to be right, the fit has to be right. It doesn't matter how it's manufactured if it's not the right shape, and that's where we come in. So we're really there to ensure that the designs that are then taken to the 3D printer fit as well as they can.
And how do you obtain your information about patient shape? Are these measurements that you directly take, or do you work with existing imaging modalities like CT and MRI? Can you import such data and digitize it to create shapes?
Yeah, so in the majority of cases, we don't even need data as complex as CT or MRI. We just take a 3D digital surface scan, which in the case of prosthetics and orthotics is routinely taken anyway. So we're using the data that exists there already and has a huge amount of information, but it's not being analyzed and there's not the useful measures extracted from it.
Is there any integration and training needed by clinics in order to introduce your service?
Yeah, and it's a really important part of the work that we've been doing over the last few months. It's not just about having the technology, it's about making it accessible and work for our users and our customers. So working on the training is a big part of the service that we provide.
And are you also able to help with second fitting? So what happens if with best intentions something is done and then it is fitted and it still doesn't quite match the biological structure it's meant to match? Can you help with that aspect at all?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, this is if you look at it in engineering terms, it's a complex optimization problem with potentially multiple minima across the space. There's so many different devices, and so actually a big part of it is selecting it down to those potential best case candidates that could then be tried out. So yeah, we're still there to help in the second vetting.
And what do you see as your biggest upcoming revenue driver? Where do you think this is going to really be scaled up and make it big? In what sort of applications and with what customers?
So I think it's the prosthetics and orthotics work for us because it's so scalable by having a software solution directly into the clinic. And particularly when we look at key markets such as the USA, there's huge potential for growth in that area. And it's a constantly expanding global issue with the number of people that are having that require these devices increasing every year.
Josh, thank you very much for a very three-dimensional presentation, to say the least. I'd now like to take this opportunity to introduce Dr. Ifeyinwa Kanu, who I hope is going to introduce IntelliGigest Limited to us. Welcome.
Hello.
We can hear you very well. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. By 2050, we will need to feed over 9 billion people as well as achieve net zero. I'm Dr. Ifeyinwa Kanu. I'm the founder and CEO of IntelliGigest. I love nature and I'm passionate about engineering solutions to address environmental challenges. Next slide, please. Food waste has a huge economic, social, and environmental impact. However, food waste contains so much nutrients. Next slide, please. Meat and nature-inspired robots that recovers nutrients in inedible food waste on site for growing nutrient-dense fruits and vegetables, as well as in cellular protein. The nutrients and sustainable chemicals recovered can also be used as building block chemicals for other manufacturing processes. Next slide, please. iDigest is agnostic to food waste variation, as we use embedded sensors to analyze the food waste before dosing enzymes and monitoring the breakdown of the complex food waste molecules to create simple molecules. Next slide. The simple molecules are dried and transported using existing logistics, which means that we don't need to send out new trucks on the road to collect the food waste, to collect the processed material. Next slide, please. We are addressing a global market expected to reach over 52 billion by 2025. Next slide, please. We have established traction with potential users. And because food waste is a global issue and cuts across different sectors, we also are having discussions with different other organizations. Next slide, please. We provide our solution on a servitization model with a monthly recurrent revenue and yearly maintenance for every iDigest, which means that within a lifetime of 10 years, we are actually adding value to the user of our solution. Next slide, please. By 2025, we expect a turnover of over 90 million and an EBITDA of over 64 million, while providing over 7,000 units of our solution, starting off from the UK, Europe, and also entering other global markets. Next slide, please. We're currently raising a total sum of 3 million, with 50% of that investment raise committed already. The drawdown of the fund will be tranched over a 2-time period built on specific milestones. And then we expect that in 6 years' time, we'll be going for an IPO to actually enhance and also achieve global presence of our solution. Next slide, please. We've worked with various organizations to build and develop this solution, having achieved quite vast technical improvements and ready to get the product to market. Next slide, please. We are made up of different experts with very complementary skills. We've had series of experiences working with global companies, both on manufacturing as well as legal support. And myself, I've got a PhD in environmental engineering with my research interest focused on optimizing anaerobic processes using artificial intelligence. Next slide, please.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to interrupt you at this point and start taking questions.
Thank you.
It'd be really helpful to me if you could clarify what in the symbolic bag that you had at the back of your bin, what sort of key nutrients might one find in there, and what might you do with them downstream once they have been extracted from food waste?
Thank you so much for that question. So when we break down the food waste, which is a complex molecule, we break them down into simple molecules that mostly some fatty acids and amino acids, some polysaccharides and some organic acids, as well as having the key trace elements that fundamentally are in food materials. So those are the specific kind of materials you find in the broth that come out from the system. These can be applied in hydroponics, which is vertical farming, to produce nutrient-dense fruits and vegetables. Depending on where the food waste is coming from, it can be used in growing cellular proteins, which is more providing meat that doesn't necessarily have to cause more adverse challenges to the environment. And it can be used also in other manufacturing processes, such as in packaging, in cosmetics, and then in detergents.
So given the fact that you have no direct control of what gets put in the bin, how do you detect and handle accidental contamination of your food waste input with non-food material?
Definitely an interesting question. So when you look at the system we have, it has 3 key components, 3 key reactors. So the first reactor is the holding chamber, where the food waste is actually broken down, macerated, and analyzed before the enzyme is dosed. So it's only if you have any form of material that is not organic, then it can't progress into the next chamber, because then it won't be macerated to be able to progress into the next chamber. So that is a way we prevent such materials moving to the next chamber, such that the user or the operator could actually take it off at the end of the day after the system has finished its operation. You're muted. You're muted.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. I would like to now take this opportunity to introduce Lewis Hornby, who will be introducing jelly drops to us.
Hi, I'm Lewis, and to understand the story of jelly drops, I need to first introduce you to my chief research partner. Next slide, please. Grandma Pat. Now, Grandma Pat had dementia for 7 years, but a few years ago, her condition dramatically declined. She was rushed to hospital with severe dehydration. Thankfully, she made a full recovery, but I was shocked that something as simple as not drinking enough could have such a huge effect on her health. Next slide, please. Looking into it further, I realized this situation wasn't uncommon. Unfortunately, for the 50 million people living with dementia, dehydration is a leading cause of death. To understand this better, I lived in my grandma's care for a month, and whilst I realised many struggled with hydration, they all love sweets, and that's what gave me the idea to create jelly drops. These bright, easy to pick up drops with 95% water contain extra ingredients to further optimise hydration. They're vegan, sugar-free, and contain natural colours and flavours, and they're solid, making them easy to chew, but they don't pop in the mouth. Next slide, please. This is Grandma's first interaction with them, and in this 10-minute period, Grandma ate 7 drops. For context, for me to get her to drink the equivalent would have taken hours of me sitting with her and required much more support. Next slide, please. Online videos of Grandma eating jelly drops received over 100 million views and featured on the BBC, Sky, and many others. And as a result of this press, we had over 50,000 people from around the world sign up to our mailing list. Next slide, please. After 18 months of developing the product and filing IP, we launched in July 2020 to a fantastic response. We've already reached over 7,500 customers, and we've got strong foundations to grow next year, having listened to customer feedback and refine the product even further. We've also, next slide, please. We've also done well in the care sector, despite COVID. And as we're coming to the end of our initial pilots, where we're seeing great results with some groups already rolling out across their cohort. And we have a fantastic pipeline into next year with over 10% of the UK market waiting to trial jelly drops. Next slide, please. We expect to max out our current production facility in March 2021, and that's why we're raising investment to scale with demand. This increase in demand will come through our B2C and B2B channels, but also shipping to the US, where we currently have over 35,000 people on our waiting list. Next slide, please. Over the past 2 years, we've built a great team to help us execute on these plans, and we also have the support of some fantastic industry experts in the confectionery space, in digital acquisition and subscription, and in the care sector. We're raising £750,000 to bolster our team and increase production capabilities, and we'd love for you to join our team of investors, which include the founder of one of the largest care home groups in the UK, in our mission to help those living with dementia live better lives. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Lewis, for a truly colorful presentation. I would very much like to ask you, what is the 5% that isn't water?
Well, you know, you've got your colors and your flavors in there. So there's a bit of a sweetener, and there's a few other carbohydrates that help with the hydration. And yeah, that's about it. So yeah, the electrolytes and things like that.
So how do you ensure that someone doesn't start using this as their only source of water and therefore ODs on the remaining components?
Well, I think to overdose, you know, any ingredient that is in that 5% is still in a very small quantity. So, you know, you could get through 10 packs a day and you'd still be okay. But yeah, it's very important that these aren't, you know, seen as a substitute, and that's not really an issue we're facing yet, especially in the care sector, where it's seen as an extra tool to help them stay on top of hydration rather than a substitute for traditional methods.
A question from the audience is, are you able to add soluble medication to combine hydration with therapy? Is that something you've thought about?
Yes, definitely. So, you know, essentially jelly drops is the delivery system at the moment is geared towards purely hydration. But, you know, there's many other things that could do: protein boost, calorie boost, vitamin boost. But also as a way of delivering medicine and potentially adding extra value to sort of generic medicines as well.
And are you primarily going to scale up by doing business to customer, B2C, or do you see a big opportunity also business to business?
Yeah, I think B2B is definitely well, we're doing both sort of equally at the moment, but we look to scale quite rapidly through the care sector. So B2B, we want to make sure we're reaching the people that need the product the most, and a lot of them are in care homes, but a lot of also out in the community. So that's why we have our direct to consumer branch, and we're also speaking with sort of NHS trusts to reach people in those sort of settings also, but it's a bit of a longer process to get into those situations.
And do you have any direct metrics or measurement or evidence of achieving better health and hydration, particularly in those elderly patients? How do you quantify that?
Yeah, so that's what we're working on with these trials in the care homes, but they aren't clinical trials. They were just sort of trials that the care homes see fit to do to roll out across their group. We are doing some trials with Imperial, which is going to be involve taking sort of blood serum osmolality to check the hydration levels of people having the drops and comparing it to the group before and after. But we're definitely moving in the direction of gathering more clinical evidence to back up the claims of the product.
Thank you very much, Lewis. All I can say at the end of this is I definitely want some, so please add me to your mailing list.
Yeah, sure, will do.
I'd now like to introduce our next speaker for today, Dr. Lorenzo Conti, who's going to be discussing Crover with us.
Next slide, please. Cereal grains are the backbone of our global food system. Yet, more than 20% of harvested grain is lost during the storage phase and never reaches our table. Grain storage operators, in fact, fight a constant battle with infestations such as molds and insects, which can develop over time due to uncontrolled temperature and humidity conditions. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yet, currently, there is no way to verify the condition of grains while still in storage, essentially turning silos and sheds into a black box of grains. The problem is with the picture that a grain operator can get using existing solutions, which can be divided in two main classes: samples or direct measurements taken near the surface of the bulk, and static temperature probes. The first is unrepresentative of conditions within the bulk of the grains, and the second requires large upfront capital investment and still only provides a very limited picture. Next slide, please. Our solution, which we recently unveiled on the TechCrunch startup battlefield stage, is the
Hello. We seem to have encountered a small technical difficulty with Lorenzo. I would therefore like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Karl Obszanski, who will be introducing Aston Vision Sciences to us. Welcome, Karl.
Hello there. My name is Dr. Karl Obszanski. I am the founder and CEO of Aston Vision Sciences, which aims to bring quality eye care everywhere. Next slide, please. According to the World Health Organization, over 2.2 billion people have vision impairment, and sadly, 1 billion of those are preventable. Most of these diseases, such as glaucoma, cataract, or even the previously mentioned wet macular degeneration do have a cure, but only if caught early. And this problem is not only in the developing world, it's in countries such as the UK, Europe, and the USA. The reason being that common devices that are used today do not fulfill patients' needs. And why not? Well, deep research into common devices show that they have limited testing ability, which means you need several different devices to perform comprehensive eye tests. A lot of the technology, although it looks new, is based on old recycled techniques. And the devices are expensive and non-portable, which means patients need to make journeys to the point of care, such as hospitals or clinics. Aston Vision Sciences has a solution to this in the form of an instrument called the POV scope. This instrument allows full front-to-back eye examination in one go-to solution. This is because it's based on a one-of-a-kind, never-before-seen illumination system that's being used in the medical devices. This instrument is portable. It's about the size of a hairdryer, which means you can get access to greater patients, which means larger markets. Next slide, please. This is what the instrument looks like. In image number 1, this is a picture of the prototype instrument. The cost of the instrument is currently set at £6,500. And because we can do front-to-back image capture, we can then run diagnosis on this large data set that will allow us to capture and recognize disease earlier. This instrument has been developed hand in hand with clinicians and end users. So in image number 2, they've asked for a stationary device that you can use in a clinic, or image number 3 shows the actual prototype being used in a real-world patient. Image 4 is the actual device, prototype device, in the kit form. And the images at the bottom show some of the captures that we'll be able to do in the future. So what's the takeaway from this slide is what could previously be achieved with several instruments can now be done with one low-cost AI-powered solution. Next slide, please. So far, we've raised over 600,000 from grants and private investment. This includes 2 Innovate UK grants and private investment as well. Importantly, we have full assignment of the original patent, and we are developing 2 more patents to complement our technology. We currently are based in Birmingham. We have 4 full-time staff and 2 part-time staff, and we expect to be on the market in Q2 2022 with a Class 2B medical device. Our business model will be fast to market with an instrument, high-margin instrument, followed by software upgrades and a subscription model to an AI diagnosis service. This means we have recurring revenues into the future. What are we looking for? An investment partner to, at this stage, invest 300,000. We need help with business strategy, supply chain and distribution, and we want to roll out to international markets, EU, China, and USA. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Carl. Could I trouble you to tell us which part specifically represents the main innovation of your technology? Is it the device or is it the software associated with it?
It's the device. It's the way the device is able to take pictures of the eye. So you've got one instrument that can now look all the way from the front, the cornea, back to the retina, be able to capture images and data all throughout. And then based on those images, you can diagnose different diseases.
And would one need to change the lenses on the top of the device for different examinations?
No, at the moment not. However, we will introduce attachments that will allow us to further increase the functionality.
And who do you see as being the primary payer for this? Do you expect this to sell this directly to ophthalmology clinics? Would you see the NHS or broader national healthcare systems as a customer?
Correct. Our target customer will be UK private clinics, which are looking for a gateway instrument that will be able to diagnose as many patients as possible. The reason why these clinics are looking for a device like this is they want to generate additional revenue streams by being able to provide treatments. So the more patients they're able to scan, the more people they can convert. NHS is a customer, but not a first customer because of its complicated procurement. and also foreign markets as well. So we've got people, you know, even in China, where they're investing lots of money into portable early diagnosis. And this is a target market for us as well.
What retraining or other change would be needed by the practitioner to use your instrument compared to what they're currently doing?
Surprisingly little. So the tests that we can perform are already being performed on the existing devices, but the existing devices are large desktop-based instruments, whereas we can now combine this into a small handheld unit that you can take to the patient. So it's almost like moving from a landline telephone into a mobile phone. You have additional features that you can then take with you.
And finally, is the instrument interactive with the eye? So for example, do you have AI-driven illumination that changes driven by eye function?
No, the AI system will be purely on the data that's captured. So we'll be able to run analysis. Really, the doctor wants to be able to control the instrument to be able to focus on regions that they consider important for that test. And the AI component will come later after we've reached market. So we want to get to market quickly with the instrument and then expand on the functionality.
Thank you very much, Carl. That was a really illuminating presentation. If I may, I'd like to now briefly return to Lorenzo Conti, who I think encountered some technical difficulties, and give the audience the chance to ask him any questions on the remainder of his presentation.
Yeah, apologies about the connection giving up on me at the worst time. Ready to go again.
Perhaps as a way of
right.
Introducing your presentation, could I just trouble you to perhaps give the last 2 or 3 slides to refocus us on what you're doing?
Yeah, so cereal grains are the backbone of our global food system. Yet, more than 20% of harvested grain is lost during the storage phase and never reaches our table. Grain storage operators, in fact, fight a constant battle with infestations such as molds and insects, which can develop over time because of uncontrolled temperature and moisture conditions. Next slide, please. Yet, currently, there is no way to verify the condition of grains while still in storage. Next slide, please. Essentially turning silos and sheds into a black box of grains. The problem is with the picture that a grain operator can get using existing solutions, which can be divided in 2 main classes: samples or their measurements taken near the surface of the bulk, and static temperature probes. The first is unrepresentative of conditions within the bulk of the grains, and the second requires large upfront capital investment and still only provides a very limited picture. Next slide, please. Our solution, which we recently unveiled on the TechCrunch Startup Battlefield stage, is the Crover. A Crover is the world's first underground drone and the first robotic device able to swim through grains and monitor their conditions. If you're a grain operator, you receive a notification when temperature and moisture values exceed a threshold, and you can log into the web-based Crover platform to visualize a 3D map of temperature and moisture, as well as an historical plot of how these conditions have changed over time, so that you can take appropriate measures before infestations are able to develop. Next slide, please. The Crover robot is based on a novel physical effect, which I discovered during my PhD at the University of Edinburgh, what we like to call now the Crover effect. This works not just in grains and seed, but also in sand, powders, and any other assembly of solid granular particles. Next slide, please. Our initial focus is to target centralized off-farm storage sites with at least 20,000 tons storage capacity that store for a continuous period of at least 3 months. Next slide, please. The Crover team is the perfect balance of agri and tech. It is made of the only individuals in the world who know and understand the physics and the technology behind the Crover robot. And on top of that, we have a cumulative experience of 36 years in the food supply chain. Next slide, please. We're keen to talk with grain operators about testing the Crover robot for monitoring their stock. Next slide, please. Or with potential investors for our £500,000 pre-seed round. So if you think you can help Crover reach every grain, please come chat with us and help us start #SavingGrains. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. I never thought the day would come where I'd be asked to ask granular questions, but here they come. What specifically is your device actually measuring? I understand it moves in a really innovative way, but what do you look for in that large, vast volume of grain?
So the current version has temperature and moisture sensors on the sort of tail, as we call it. So that's the only two parameters that we're measuring at the moment, but we really see the device as a platform to enable any other type of sensors or other solutions, be chemicals to hinder pest growth, to reach areas of the bulk where they can't reach otherwise. So grain storage monitoring is phase 1. We've already started working on phase 2, which is sampling of grain bulks with support from Innovate UK and the Agri Epicenter. And phase 3 is going to be addressing problems locally once we have identified where they are.
And if your device is now swimming through the grain, you must have the opportunity to use new types of sensors. So what would you deploy next?
I mean, the next obvious ones, also in terms of ease of implementation, is CO2 and carbon monoxide sensors. One reason why we started working on sampling as well is there are advanced analyses that can only be carried out in the lab at the moment. For instance, measuring mycotoxins and identifying the specific type of infestation that you've got in the bulk. You might be able with simple sensor to identify that you've got some infestations, but then the next question is it grain weevils? Is it, what specific type of mold have you got if you've got molds? So some more in-depth analysis. At the moment, there isn't any sensor that can analyze them in situ.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. I think we have now completed all of the questions that were meant for both you and Carl. And I would also like to take this opportunity now, if I may, to thank all Enterprise Fellow awardees who have contributed to today's presentation, and particularly you, Lorenzo, for dealing with adversity at the most challenging possible time. I also hope today's been very interesting to the audience and that you have found some great opportunities and some great technologies that are being supported by the Academy. We're now launching a quick anonymous poll to ask you for your rating of this event. The results won't be announced, and thank you in advance for your responses. The Academy will also send a short feedback survey after today, and I'll be grateful if you could complete that feedback to support the Academy and the shaping of future events. In fact, it's probably appearing on your screen right now. Finally, as I mentioned at the start, you are welcome to connect with the awardees and to further discuss both their business opportunities and investment, if that is of interest to you. Please add your details to the contact form of the Academy team, and they will facilitate these introductions for you. The link for this form is being shared again with you in the chat if you're interested in taking advantage of it. And finally, we would like to mention that the Enterprise Fellowships Program's next call for applications will be launched in February.